Hi, in this tutorial I will describe the Laravel files and folders structure. Keep in mind that as a beginner you do not need to know about each and every files and folders of Laravel. I have just opened this Laravel app using the first Laravel app using the VS Code editor. The first folder is app folder and this is the most important folder of the application. In this folder, you will see that there are other folders. One is console folder. In the console folder, you will see there is a file kernel.php. You know in Laravel that we use many default commands. Suppose PHP artisan serve. But if you want, you can add your own custom commands here. But as a beginner, we do not need to know more about it. So I am not going to describe it. Another folder is exceptions folder, and in the exceptions folder you will see a file handler.php. This file is used to handle the exceptions. As a beginner you do not need to know more about it. There is another folder that is HTTP folder. This is one of the most important folders and you will see other subfolders here. One is controllers and another is middleware. The controllers folder is one of the most important folders. You know that Laravel is a MVC framework and the most important part of MVC is controller that controls the full application. This folder contains a default controller.php file. But in order to run our application and in order to develop our application, we will have to create our own controller files. So each of our own controller files will extend this default controller. When we will go to show the practical application, you will understand very well about it. There is another folder that is middleware folder. This folder just filters the HTTP request of the application. It acts as a bridge between a request and response. For example, if you see there is authenticate.php middleware. What is the function of this middleware? This middleware verifies whether the user of the application is authenticated or not. If the user is authenticated, it redirects him to the home page. But if the user is not authenticated, he will be redirected to the login page. You can create your own middleware here. And if you create your own middleware, you will have to register that middleware in the kernel.php file. Okay, here is kernel.php file. You see that all the existing middlewares are already registered here, and when you will create your own, you will have to register your own middleware in this file also. After HTTP, there is another important folder that is models. Here we will put all the files that are related to the database connection. Another folder is providers folder. The service providers are the central place of all Laravel application bootstrapping. Your own application as well as all of the Laravel's core services are bootstrapped by service providers. This folder is not for beginners, so we can skip it now. There is another important folder is bootstrap folder. This file contains only one file, that is app.php, and a folder is cache folder. This cache folder contains the service and route caches, and in this way it optimizes the performance of the project. We do not need to modify anything in this folder. Then another folder is config folder, and this folder contains all the configuration files. You will see here the database configuration file, email configuration file, then session configuration file, etc. configuration files are listed here. There is another folder that is database folder. In the database folder, you will see there are also some subfolders: factories, migrations, seeders. You can create the migration files in the migrations folder and use those files to create the tables in your existing database. It allows you to modify and share the application's database schema. You can modify the table by adding a new column or deleting an existing column. There is another folder that is called seeders. Seeder is actually a tool that is used to include the dummy data to your database automatically. Developers can add testing data to their database table using this seeder. There is another tool that is called Faker, and we will work into the factories folder in order to work with the fakers. Using that tool Fakers, we can insert a lot of free fake data for the SQL in order to test our application. Developers can insert a bulk amount of information here using only on command. Suppose a programmer wants to insert 200 or 500 information under a particular table, then he can easily create that dummy data for 500 entries using only one single command. So we will see how it works in our practical application later. The another important folder is public folder. In the public folder, you will see the important file that is index.php. This is the first file that is loaded in your application. When you will want to run your application using your web browser, then this file will be loaded. In the public folder, you can add all other public files. For example, a public JavaScript file, public CSS file, image file, etc. you can add into this folder. Resources is another folder, and by default here you will see CSS folder, JS folder, and for language there is another folder, lang folder. And the most important folder here is views. This view is the view of the MVC pattern. In this folder you have to put all the HTML files that will be represented to the end users. There is another important folder is routes. Route means URL. Using this folder you have to create the URL routes for your web application or API. There are two kinds of routes. One is web route and another is API route. If you want to create routes for your web application, then you will have to use the web route. If you want to create routes for your API development, then you will have to use the API route. Another important folder is a storage folder. This folder actually contains all the log files, compile blade templates, file-based session, etc. This app folder may be used to store any file that is automatically generated by your application. And the framework folder, this is used to store the framework generated files and caches. So you do not need to do anything about this. The logs folder is sometimes important because it contains your application log files. The tests folder, all the unit test cases are actually included in this folder, so I am going to skip it right now. Another important folder is vendor folder. This holds all the composer dependency files. When you will install any package in your application, then this package will be saved into the vendor folder. So you do not actually need to edit anything here. Another important file is .env file. This default .env file contains the configuration values. You will see a lot of environment variables here. Suppose app name, app environment. Then for email sending there are mailer, mail host, mail port, etc. When I will go to work with the practical application, then I will show you how to use this .env file. So I am going to skip it right now. There is another file .env.example. If you are developing a web application with a team, then you can include a .env.example file with your application. So other developers will get an idea which environment variables are used here and needs to run your application. So it will not be needed all the times, so you can skip it right now. Another important file is composer.json file. This is actually a dependency manager for PHP that allows the developers to specify the project dependencies. All the packages that are used in your application must be recorded in this file. If you install any package using Composer, that will be automatically listed in this file. Also, if you want to include any globally accessible helper function, you will have to add this here under the autoload section. Another file is package.json. If you use any API related works, then this file will be useful. Normally you don't need to use this file. PHP unit.xml file. It is helpful to write the unit test cases, so you do not need to work with it now. Another is readme.md file. You can just describe your application here, how to use your application, or a lot of functionalities, how your application works, etc. You can include in the readme file. The server.php file. This file allows us to emulate the Apache's mod rewrite functionality from the built-in PHP web server. This provides a convenient way to test Laravel application without having installed in a real web server software. So you can do the task here. So this is in short about the project folder and file structure of Laravel. I think you have got the overall idea about the Laravel project folders and file structure. When you will see all these things via the live examples that I will show you afterwards, it will be more clear to you. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you.